must say it's great to be back in action with a in-person event. I think the last one I did was of this stature or this nature was the Dubai Air Show. So we're going back 18 months. I've done a couple of awards ceremonies in that time. So I hope it's like riding a bike. They say if you fall off a bike, you get back on and you can ride all right. So a bit out of practice apart from the zooming. And I've got this in case I need to fall back and do a bit of zooming. I'm Phil Blizzard, and I'm here on this occasion with breaking travel news. We're whizzing around the Arabian travel market, getting interviews for video interviews for breaking travel news in London, and it's a pleasure to be invited to moderate this session. I'm the stand-in. Alan Peaford was going to be the moderator, but with restrictions in the UK, it doesn't make sense for him to go back and spend 10 days and a lot of money in a hotel in London. So I'm here, which is great. The impact of COVID-19. I think everyone knows about the impact, unless you've been sort of hiding away from the pandemic in a cave in the Hadjar Mountains. We're all pretty aware of the serious impact COVID-19 has had on the aviation sector. So today, this panel, as you know, is about restoring confidence, and I've heard a fair bit of confidence talking to some of the aviation people yesterday, people like Fly Dubai and Etihad, and looking at how to build up business. The panel today, I was going to say, a bit like the Rolling Stones. We've got about 100 years of aviation experience between these three industry experts and myself as an onlooker, as a journalist and broadcaster when it comes to aviation. But not quite the Rolling Stones. I think the Rolling Stones were about 350 years, so you're mere youngsters compared with them. So I will introduce to you who we have on the panel today. Closest to me from Wizz Air, fledgling airline out of Abu Dhabi, but of course long time established in the UK. So it's the Chief Commercial Officer, George Michaelopoulos. That's an interesting mix of names, isn't it? A bit of Greek there. Okay, so we'll be talking about Wizz Air. In the middle we have the General Manager for Africa and Middle East of Embraer, Hussein Dabas, with a large history in aviation. And at the far end we have John Brayford, who is, what should we say, a private aviation startup operator, but with a big heritage of aviation. So they're going to be giving us some insights on the way they see the industry moving forward and how confidence can be built up. So I think what we've got here today, we've got, closest to me, George from Wizz Air, an airline operator providing flights to interesting destinations at, what should we say, attractive prices. At the far end, we've got the upper sector in many ways, something perhaps we all aspire to, private jets. And they're having a bit of a boom at the moment, I think, talking to a lot of operators over the last few weeks, in fact, the last few months. So it'll be interesting to get John's insight. And in the middle, someone who's trying to sell aircraft to airlines and private jet operators. So it'll be interesting to find out Hussein's opinion on things. So let's start off with Michael. Let's have an overview, first of all. Sorry, George. George Michael, are you going to sing? I bet you get some of that quite a lot. So George, start off, give us an overview of your aviation history.
Mine personally, or?
Yes, what you've done in the world of aviation.
Yeah, so I've been at Wizz Air now 11 years. I started off as head of revenue management. We were a smallish airline, 28 aircraft when I joined. We've gone quite a way since then. We are now at 130 aircraft, so more than 4 times larger. I've got a brief presentation, which I'll give you a little bit more history on Wizz Air then. Before that, I worked for 3 other smaller airlines, yeah, very happy to be here today.
Okay, and if we move across to the far side, John, you've got quite a colourful heritage when it comes to aviation, from heritage carriers to airlines in the region, including RAC Air. So a little overview of your heritage in aviation.
If I can, oh, it's on, okay.
Yeah,
yeah, I think that this is the first time for me in the luxury private jet segment, but I've spent a good deal of my time in both the legacy and full service carriers and the low cost market. So I'm delighted at my ripe old Mick Jagger-like age to be given the opportunity to start up a new venture here in the UAE.
Okay, we'll be finding out more about that. And Hussein, you've got a heritage going back to, I believe, what, Royal Jordanian? So
Yes.
give us an overview of your aviation heritage.
Sure, thank you. Basically, I've spent all my career in the airline business. I started with Royal Jordanian as a ticketing agent and ending up being the president and the CEO of the airline. After that, I moved to IATA and I became the regional vice president for Africa and the Middle East. And after 4 years working with IATA, I've been working now with Embraer, also as general manager for Africa and the Middle East, selling the regional jets in that region.
So there we go, that sets the scene for our three panelists. And we'll be taking questions a bit later on when we find out more about these gentlemen's insight to the way the industry will move forward. So now I'll hand over the podium to Wizz Air.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you for coming today. What I'm going to be talking about today is giving you a little bit more background about Wizz Air, and then talk specifically about Wizz Air Abu Dhabi, which is the UAE's first ultra low-cost carrier. So Wizz Air was founded in 2004, and our CEO, Joseph Varadi, likes to tell the story that when Wizz Air started, there were many other airlines, startup airlines, which started. And I don't know how many of you know Richard Quest on CNN, but he had Joseph for an interview, and he said, listen, Joseph, there's 100 other startup airlines which started in the last 12 months. None of them have survived. None of them will survive. If you survive 12 more months, I'll invite you back onto the show. And there you go. 12 months later, he invited him back on the show. And 17 years later, we're now at 38 aircraft, and we have an order book with Airbus, actually Airbus's largest narrow-body order book, which will take us to 300 aircraft by the year 2026. Since the very beginning, we've been built around a simple purpose, which is that of liberating lives through affordable travel. In recent years, we've become Europe's fastest growing airline, Europe's greenest airline, measured by CO2 emissions per passenger. And we continue to grow outside of Europe, as demonstrated with the latest expansion into Wizz Air into Abu Dhabi. So let me talk a little bit about the ultra low cost model. I mean, this is, at the end of the day, all about simplicity and efficiency. So what are the key ingredients? One is a young and uniform fleet. As I mentioned, we are with the Airbus A320 family. Lowest CO2 emissions, I'll come back to that, but that is all about having a modern fleet, having the latest technology. Operating point to point, yes, we do have self-connecting passengers, but we keep our own model very simple. And it's passengers who then have to buy the two tickets. Operating to secondary airports. Secondary airports are not only cheaper, they're often less congested and easier to operate. We rely significantly on ancillary revenue opportunities. We're around 50% of our revenue is coming from ancillary. Low cost distribution, only distributing directly through our website and app. We've got a very outsourced model. Everything which isn't core to the business, we look to outsource. Then you've got utilization, whether that's seat density on the aircraft. We operate the A321neos with 239 seats, where there's high aircraft utilization. Ensuring that we're using that asset. We are investing in new technology. The advantage of new technology is that its uptime is much higher, but we need to make sure we're using that aircraft and utilizing that aircraft significantly. And then last and but possibly most importantly, it's high employee productivity, and more importantly, engagement. I think really the success of Wizz Air has come down to its people over the last 17 years, and this has been absolutely critical. So a little bit of history in numbers. As I mentioned, we started in 2004, carried 600,000 passengers in the first year. This grew in the pre-COVID year, 2019, to 41.7 million. Obviously, we saw a drop off last year, and we hit 16.6 million. I would, however, say the 16.6 million is an impressive number when compared especially to other European carriers. We continued to operate, especially last summer peak. We were able to operate up to 80% of capacity. I think this has really differentiated Wizz Air, especially in a European context versus other airlines. I think there have been some key differentiators, and I would say even globally. One, Wizz Air continued to take on new aircraft. We're one of the very few airlines globally which continued to take new aircraft during the pandemic. I'll come back to why this is so important, but going back to the previous slide on having the lowest cost base, latest technology allows you to reduce your cost base. The fuel burn is significantly lower, and not to mention the CO2 impact. The CO2 impact and NOx impact is significantly lower on latest technology aircraft. But we've not only invested in new aircraft, we've invested in new markets and new bases, as I'll go into more detail. From January, we've started our operations in Abu Dhabi, but we've entered a number of other markets. We've made pretty significant announcements in Italy, where we currently have 5 bases. We've expanded into Norway, into Germany, into Albania, into Russia. So really have a broad footprint of bases across Europe. So in numbers, we currently operate a fleet of 138 aircraft. This number is growing quickly, as I mentioned. We'll be at 300 by the year 2026. We have 43 bases across Europe and the UAE. We operate to 192 airports and 49 countries. Since the beginning, we have carried 247 million passengers and currently operate more than 1,000 routes. I think the success is now being recognized also on a industry level. We received a very prestigious award last year, the ATW Airline Award. I believe we're only the second low-cost airline to have ever won this award after Southwest Airlines a few years ago. Second element which I would highlight is the EASA Air Operator Certificate, which we received last year. This just really shows that within a European context, our pan-European presence. Normally, or you take the other airlines, their airline operating certificates tend to be in one country. We've been the first to really have a pan-European aircraft operating air operator certificate. And needless to mention, our 7-star safety ranking, which is the highest safety ranking from Airline Ratings. Maybe a couple more elements which aren't on this chart. Since 2015, we've been listed on the London Stock Exchange. And if you take our market cap today, within a European context, we are third. We're the third most valuable airline, publicly traded airline in Europe. So let me talk a little bit more about Wizz Abu Dhabi, the first ultra low-cost airline in Abu Dhabi and the United Arab Emirates. So this is born of a joint venture between ADQ and Wizz Air. And as I mentioned before, we started operations earlier this year in 2021, and as such, we're the newest national airline of the UAE. We see plenty of growth prospects in the UAE. I mean, here are just some of and in Abu Dhabi specifically, here are just some key stats. If you look at LCC penetration, compared to Western Europe, compared to the CE, Western Europe, you're at 35% CE, Central and Eastern Europe, you got 46% penetration. In the GCC, you're only at 17%. Amongst the UAE airports, Abu Dhabi was only at 5%. Then you have other key drivers like propensity to travel, currently only at 1.5 in the UAE. When you have GDP per capita, which is so high in Abu Dhabi, you have a very large population in Abu Dhabi, and you have very limited seats relative to the potential. So what is our commitment to Abu Dhabi? First and foremost, we brought the Wizz Air brand, and arguably most importantly, the ULCC operating platform, really having the industry-leading, and this is globally, industry-leading cost base, which really allows us just to open so many more markets than other carriers are able to, because we have the lowest cost. We have the lowest cost base, so it takes us less revenue to be able to cover the cost and deliver an adequate margin. We said that we'd focus on established geographies. We already have a fairly extensive footprint. We have 192 airports we operate to, so that's a good starting place. But we will not shy away from pioneering new markets. Again, the fact that we have such a low cost base is going to allow us to enter markets which other carriers have not been able to do so. We aim to be the leading low-cost carrier in the region, operating a fleet of 50 aircraft within the next decade. And we want to contribute to both tourism and diversification of Abu Dhabi's economy. As such, in summary, we're looking to bring exciting new travel opportunities to the region, provide excellent service, and offer low-fare tickets to Abu Dhabi travelers. This is a quick map of our network thus far. This is both Wizz Air Abu Dhabi and inbound flights from the Wizz Air group. As you see, there's a large focus to start with on our core markets in Central and Eastern Europe, and there's a couple of bases recently, a couple of routes from Southern Italy, actually just announced in the last week. However, we're expanding our footprint. We just announced our first intra-GCC routes to Muscat and Salalah. We have a few routes to Egypt, Alexandria, Sohag, and Luxor. And we've also opened 2 routes to Kazakhstan, to Almaty and Nur Sultan. One final slide before handing this back over. Given the trade, there's a lot of presence from the trade. Just wanted to let you know that we do, despite the fact that we're an ultra low-cost carrier, we do operate charters and we do operate allotments. So if there's anybody who has an interest, please don't hesitate to reach out. There's an email address at the bottom of the slide. With that, I thank you again for your time and look forward to the panel discussion.
George, thanks very much. Before you disappear, a couple of questions for you, and we'll open up to the floor later on. Can you give us some indication on how you see Wizz Air Abu Dhabi developing over the next 12 months, 2 years?
Yeah. So, as I said, our target is to grow to 50 aircraft within the next decade. I think the next couple of years, especially next few months, will be dependent on how restrictions open up. I think we have a pretty decent network already, and we'll be expanding, as we have more opportunities, as markets open up. So I don't want to give you any specific numbers. I think it's a little unpredictable right now, but we're going to be making important strides towards the target of 50 aircraft over 10 years.
And what about the confidence of people traveling here in the Middle East? Here in the UAE, vast number of expats, and going by some research from Fly Dubai, which they spoke about yesterday, they see that 2/3 of expat residents in the UAE are eager to travel. Have you got any thoughts, perceptions on that, and comparing it with that of your destinations and possible passengers in Europe?
Yeah. So I think the data points, across the world, really, if you look at the United States, if you look at Europe, even China, I think there's a couple of segments which pick up first. One is leisure, which I think is great for the UAE as long as it's unrestricted. I think a lot of people have been locked down, haven't had the opportunity to travel for 12 or 18 months, and are really looking to get out, spend some time, visit a new city, go to the beach. So this outbound leisure, and I'd say more beach than city. I think city is still a little tentative. Well, that's one. And then the other segment, which I believe is what you're referring to, what we refer to in jargon as VFR traffic, There's families visiting friends and relatives, whether it's expats or other, who haven't been able to go and visit their families again for the last 12 to 18 months. So these are the two markets, and also, talking to colleagues in other countries like the U.S. These are the markets which have picked up quickest.
George, thank you very much indeed for your insights. We'll move across now. We'll go across the stage, and if you just joined us, next person to have a few words is Hussein Daba, who's the General Manager of Special Projects for Embraer. So start off and give us an overview of your product, the type of aircraft you got, the size, and operators here in the Middle East.
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, Embraer, as you know, is the third largest aircraft manufacturer in the world, and we have like 30% of the production of regional jets around the world. And before I get into regional jets and the value of regional jets for airlines, 2020 was a disastrous year for aviation, and you all know that. In 2019, there were over 4 billion passengers that took to the air and flew around the world, generating over $800 billion to the airlines. 2020 has never seen such a drop in passenger numbers, and this was disastrous for the airlines. And what we saw was that the reduction in the size of airplanes that airlines wanted to fly because of the high cost of operation. And we saw, and unfortunately, and I'm very sad to see that many airlines have grounded their 380s, whether it's Lufthansa or British Airways or even Qatar or Etihad. They all have decided to reduce the number of flights, and some of them canceled the operation altogether. What we've seen is that more and more airlines are opting for smaller airplanes, and this is where we see Embraer becoming the aircraft of choice for regional operations. If we look at the Middle East, we can see that over 50% of the flights depart with less than 120 passengers. 60% have less than 70% seat factor, which means that the demand for smaller airplanes is becoming the cause and the interest of airlines. Now, what's happening after post-COVID, which we believe that to reach the 2019 levels, it will take up to the third quarter of 2024 for airlines to reach that kind of threshold. But in order to reach that threshold, airlines really would need to re-strategize, to think again about how they want to run their business. It is very clear that the leisure traffic will pick up first, the regional traffic will pick up first, and then it will move into the business. And we've all seen that most of our business meetings are being conducted on Zoom or Microsoft Teams and so on and so forth. And because of the reduction in revenues and sometimes profits by companies, they will reduce the business travel. So leisure travel is going to become the norm to a large extent. We've seen this, for example, with Lufthansa, where they have increased their destinations in the Mediterranean area by around 80%. If we look at Polish Airlines, they have concentrated a lot on charter business to go to destinations. But we also have to remember that price is not really a factor for making a choice to travel. We've all have COVID fatigue. We're all tired of what's been happening to us during the past year. And we're going to see that people will start wanting to jump on airplanes. We believe the numbers indicate that 40% of leisure travel will come back by July, and 75% will come back by September. And this is according to the IATA numbers. So airlines need to look again and look at their systems and their network and see where they can put the right aircraft. I mean, if I look at Embraer, we've seen a big demand in aircraft. And I don't know if you heard this or not, but just recently, KLM started receiving their brand new Embraer airplanes from an order of 30-some airplanes. We also had an announcement of another 30 airplanes, 195 being ordered by an undisclosed customer because they want to announce it during the air show soon. So airlines really want to go into smaller aircraft for many reasons. I mean, I remember when I was in Royal Jordanian, we got ourselves 12 Embraers at that time. And we were one of the first airlines after Egypt Air that decided to take these airplanes. And I tell you, from a practical point of view, I mean, in RJ, and we used to fly to destinations 3 times a week, or maximum a daily flight to Beirut or Cairo or Jeddah or Kuwait and so on. Because we couldn't fill the 320s and 321s to a rate that becomes profitable. But when we got the Embraers, the 175s and the 195s, we jumped from daily to 4 daily, from 3 times a week to daily. And I recall that because I was at that time the VP commercial. People called and say, I want to book a flight to Cairo on Monday. So the reservation agent would tell them, what time? And the guy would say, what do you mean, what time? On Sunday. We would say, no, we have a flight at 8, we have a flight at 12, we have a flight at 4. So it was really a game changer to a lot of things. And what happened is that it increased the number of passengers tremendously. So if you have a business meeting in Cairo, you can go on the 8 o'clock flight in the morning and come back at the 8 o'clock flight at night, which by that you save yourself the hotel and other things. So if I come back here, we're seeing more and more people wanting the frequency. That's what makes them make a decision to fly with ABC airline rather than XYZ airline, because they want to know that they are reliable. But now, if we look at post-COVID, what passengers are looking for? They're looking for secured source of information. And they depend a lot on, let's say, the CDC, World Health Organization, to indicate that this country is safe to travel to, and so on. They want to make sure that the airline is providing a clean and hygiene aircraft. The destination they want to go to, they want to make sure that it has also the proper medical facilities and so on, just in case they happen to get it. And to a large extent, they want to avoid hub and spoke. That's why they're taking shorter flights to between A and B. That might not be very good for mega carriers like the ones available in the Gulf, but that could be for a short term. And then eventually things, when people get vaccinated and people start feeling more comfortable in flying, everything will come back to normal. What needs to be done now is to really concentrate on vaccination. And we need to have this passport that, yes, I'm vaccinated and I can travel. It's really music to my ears when the United States just last week announced that people who are vaccinated do not need to wear a mask indoor or outdoor. But I'm vaccinated, but I still wear my mask. And I just want to be careful that I wear it at all times until we get this pandemic behind us. We also need to make sure that the protocols are right. But what is really disturbing the passengers right now is the multi-rules and regulations. Yes, you need a PCR before arrival, and you get a PCR upon arrival, and then you can stay for 4 days, and so on and so forth. There has to be a collaborative agreement between countries to make it easy and simple for passengers. Yes, we need to have a PCR done, but if I'm vaccinated, the 2 shots, and I have proof of that, maybe these things need to be reduced a bit so it will allow more passengers to travel. There are a lot of things that needs to be done, and I think what happened during the past year with the COVID woke us all up that we can't take things for granted. We need to anticipate problems and try to solve it, but collaboratively. We can't each country do it on its own, because for aviation, it is a one world kind of industry, and we need to make sure that we have all the right points and regulations done in collaborative way.
Hussein, I'd like to go back to what you're saying about the size of the aircraft allowing operators to offer a greater frequency more flexibility for customers. Give us an overview of your various models and the number of seats, the number of passengers they can carry.
We have three basic models, and this 175, which carries up to 80 passengers and can travel around 3,700 kilometers. And then we have the 190, which is larger, and that can go around to 5,000 kilometers with 100 passengers. And then the 195, which is the largest, around 120, and that's all in dual class and can go up to 5,000. This is a commercial break here, so let me give you some information about the aircraft. Basically, it is a beautiful airplane with aisle and window seats, which makes it very comfortable for the passengers. It's a regional jet with the previous type was with GE engines and now with Pratt & Whitney, and we have over 2,000 airplanes flying around the world because the biggest markets are, of course, in Europe and the United States. We have now the new, what we call E2 Embraers, and they are really almost a brand new airplane. We learned from the 15 years of experience of operating the first E1s. We have improved 1,000 parts of that aircraft. We have new wings, and each aircraft of those have a different wing, actually. While if we look at the competition, they have basically the same wing for different size airplanes. And that is to make sure that there's the reduction in fuel. We have almost 20% reduced fuel burn than a similar aircraft from the other manufacturers, which makes it very convenient for airlines. It is fly-by-wire, it is new landing gear, new engines. And what is important about the engines here, let's remember that in the Middle East and the Gulf, we have a very hot and harsh environment to the engines, whether it's from the dust or the sand or the extreme heat. So the engines we have developed with Pratt & Whitney are fit for the hot and harsh environment and make sure that the aircraft can operate always on time without much.
Hussein, thanks very much for that commercial, and we'll move across now to John Brayford. I think this is going to be an advertorial from commercials to advertorials. John, you're setting up at this time, during the COVID pandemic, a new venture here in the UAE, described as a fractional aircraft ownership company. What do you mean by that?
Right, okay. Well, this is a venture for private business jets, so the much smaller jets than either two of my colleagues here have been speaking about. And here currently in the regional market, but if we talk specifically about the UAE, if you want to fly by private jet, you've really only got two options. One is to charter, and the other is to purchase your own jet outright. And both of those come with some advantages, of course, and a huge number of disadvantages. And the market in the middle is a market that's never really been explored, particularly in the UAE, and that is for an individual to purchase a share of a private jet rather than to own one outright. So a share will give you access to effectively your own aircraft for a certain number of hours per year. You will not have the high capital cost of entry, which is certainly a deterrent for many people, but you'll also share in all of the complex running and maintenance and operating costs that normally plague the private ownership model of outright ownership for a business jet. And certainly things like the devaluation of the asset will be shared amongst 10 rather than absorbed amongst an individual. We know, sorry, I was just going to say, we know from pre-pandemic days that the business jet market in the region was definitely on the increase, considerably on the increase, and that increase has really not relented, particularly in the region, save for the fact that people can't go to many of the places that they would otherwise want to go because of the restrictions. If you take, for example, the current restrictions in large parts of Europe, the Indian subcontinent, which are imposed from here.
As you were saying, private aviation before COVID was growing very, very strong in this region, perhaps one of the fastest growing sectors of aviation. And talking to a lot of people from different organizations with private jets in the last 12 months, a big demand because people are traveling in their own little bubble, going through executive departure terminals rather than going through an airport itself. So a positive points there. So from your perspective of jet sets, where are you at? And also some indication of the aircraft you're going to be operating.
Okay, well, we've now launched, de facto, we've launched the jet sets here in the UAE, and my VP sales, my team are in the front row here, who will be actively in the market in the coming weeks. And we hope to purchase our first aircraft at the end of this month, and we have decided to standardize on the Bombardier Global 6000, which is the larger of the business jet fleet.
Okay, and how do you see your market here in the UAE? I mean, I've been talking to people like Vista Jet. They've brought in the Global 7500, which is the most expensive and the longest range, going to the west coast of the United States from Dubai. Do you see yours as more of a Middle East regional operation or longer range as well?
No, we see a longer range, perhaps not as far as the east coast of the US without some sort of intermediate fuel stop, but certainly right through the Far East, Africa, the region, and into Europe to the furthest reaches of Ireland and Scotland.
Yeah. There's a lot of competition, though, isn't there, in the region when it comes to private aviation, with long-standing players like Empire and newcomers like Jet Class as well, and Vista Jet. How do you see yourself fitting in?
Well, there are a lot of competitors in the marketplace, but they, by and large, have stuck to the charter model. And now the charter model, certainly the marketplace indicates that people are chartering more often than they were pre-pandemic. And it comes quite quickly to a point where chartering an aircraft frequently makes no economic sense at all. There is a gap, though, significant gap, between that and outright ownership. You really need to have an annual flying regime of 400 hours or above to make outright ownership economically sensible. But once you get more than 200 hours of chartering, chartering makes no sense at all. So purchasing a fraction, which enables you to tailor your investment, your ownership of the aircraft, exactly to your flying needs, is a smart way of doing business.
Right, okay. Thanks very much for that. Now, some of the key topics for this is restoring confidence in travel, looking at building business and global solutions. So perhaps we go across the panel here, and George, how do you perceive restoring confidence in passengers to get traveling again?
So I think there's a couple of aspects here. I think there's the health considerations, safety considerations, and I think it's now a well-accepted fact that probably one of the safest things you can do is actually fly an aircraft, just because of the how air is circulated in the aircraft, which is very similar to ICU units. So I think that element is I think is well understood. And I think restrictions. I think we're certainly moving in the right direction now. Vaccinations. In certain regions, I think, in the UAE, GCC, Europe, we are starting really, get strong momentum behind vaccinations, and we're not far from this vaccine passport. So I do see that we are, moving in the right direction, and I think airlines are going to be at the forefront here. Just putting capacity back on sale, because there is pent-up demand. We see when restrictions are eased between two countries, we see demand just shooting up. In many cases, higher than pre-pandemic levels.
Right, thanks. And Hussein, you alluded to, when you were talking before, to passes, passports. What else do you think needs to be introduced?
I think the issue of the quarantine needs to be put aside. I mean, I think just the proof that you have taken the test and you're clear does not require you to be quarantined. And I see more and more countries doing away with that and just concentrating on the PCR. I mean, without sounding condescending, but I think what Dubai is doing is really the right approach in terms of putting regulations and implementing them, but allowing people and allowing life to continue. Because everybody has suffered, every company has suffered, whether it is in aviation or land transportation or hotels or all the tourism sector has suffered tremendously. And I think we need to jumpstart it. And we can only do that by removing a lot of the restrictions that are imposed as we speak in many countries, and having this green channel between the countries so that people can travel. And people will travel. And as George just said, people have started traveling to destinations in the Mediterranean. I remember during the New Year's and Christmas holidays, Dubai was full with people who wanted to just basically get out of home and go out and visit. So the rules and regulations that were put in Dubai attracted hundreds of thousands of tourists to come to Dubai. And I think this should be emulated by many countries around the world.
And John, from your perspective, well, what are your thoughts? Not really from the perspective of jet sets, but in a broader picture.
Well, I was very interested in the article that Paul Griffith wrote a few days ago about basically offering his services to see if they could make the airport processes simpler. I think the problem is that, I share what Hussein has said, it's been made by many countries to be too complex, and so it's very, very difficult to imagine that they can therefore simplify it. The various, even a traffic light system, which in a way seems quite a simple system, is just full of the most unbelievable complexities. And until they resolve that problem, there will still be the 4 or 5 or 6 hour queues at key airports like Heathrow, which will be an enormous deterrent on people to fly out of those sorts of airports. I do think that the idea of some sort of vaccination certificate or COVID vaccine passport is going to materialize, because I can't see how there can be a viable alternative. I mean, you need a passport to be able to travel. That in itself is in some ways discriminatory, because you have to buy a passport at whatever price it is in order to be able to fly. There aren't that many people who genuinely, for medical reasons, are not able to have the vaccination. Clearly, the evidence in the UK is suggesting that the vast majority of those people now in hospital because of the Indian variant of the virus, for example, are people who were eligible for the vaccine who chose not to have it. So I think, you know, we've got to appreciate the fact that the amount of social liberty will vary from country to country. And therefore they will set their own rules, and it'll be very difficult for many countries to believe that they could accept an international set of standardized rules. Here, the community discipline is phenomenal. People wear their masks quite happily, quite willingly, they conform. And that is not the case in many parts of the world. And until that is either not seen as a risk factor, or indeed international travel has a vaccination certificate to prove your health, I can't see us improving at the rate or the steady rate that people suggest maybe over the next few months.
And that perhaps ties in with the view of a lot of analysts saying the wide-body aircraft are going to see a much slower return. And I guess you guys, all operators or potential operators of single-aisle, narrow-bodied aircraft, are probably in a strong position. And I'm going to put a question to you. How would you feel if you were operating only double-decker A380s?
Me?
All of you. One at a time. What about you, George?
Well, I think one of the risks inherent with operating long-haul services in the coming months, and one which certainly again supports our business model, is that whilst there'll be a number of announcements about the restoration of services, particularly the long-haul services, they'll also be prone to last-minute cancellations because the airlines will not be able to afford to operate at significant losses, routes that are borderline viable, because if the growth doesn't return very quickly, those routes again will disappear.
I mean, definitely the airlines who have very large airplanes, whether it's the 380 or the 777s or 747s, need to really look again on how their business plan, how they can really make sure to fill it up. But again, let's remember that still many airlines are not filling up their airplanes by choice, because they want to keep some distance between passengers. But this is going to be history very, very soon, because this is not sustainable for airlines to operate with a seat factor of 70 or 75%. I mean, we know very well that it has to be over 80% just to break even. So there is definitely a lot of pressure on airlines who have these big airplanes, and we've seen that they have parked them, or at least are reintroducing them, but at a very small scale. It's not easy now. Hopefully by 2024 things would have started to pick up and passengers will come back to the skies.
George, if you had A380s in your fleet, how would you feel?
Not much to add. I think if you just look at, the last 12 to 18 months and you look at markets like Europe, China, the US, it's really the domestic markets which have picked up first. And then you start getting this, intra-GCC, intra-European flying, or, more regional. And long haul will be last. And it's going to be extremely challenging. And I think, as Hussein says, probably 2024 is the year where that traffic will be restored. But yeah, it's going to be challenging.
We'll open the floor in a moment, but another question to you, George, being an operator on so many different routes. Very much a fluid situation with countries opening and perhaps closing down. How long does it take you to reinstate a route which has been closed because of the pandemic? What's the process involved?
Yeah. So we've really prided ourselves, and there's a chart we normally put in presentations. We didn't put it in today, just on agility. I mean, I think that's one of the key elements and key defining factors of Wizz is how agile we've been. If you take a look last August, we were able to grow to 80% of 2019 capacity, and there's no single significant airline in Europe who was able to do that last year. So what's the process? I mean, it's, there's a team really, dedicated to looking at restrictions, and we just know that when restrictions are eased, pent-up demand is there. I think we've got it wrong very few times where restrictions were eased, we loaded something, and then regretted it. But you also have to have the organization which can be that reactive, can be that agile, and thankfully we have it.
John, before we open the floor, regarding private aviation flying into different countries, what are the challenges in getting permissions to fly on different routes?
Not the same as commercial, that's for sure.
Yeah.
They're certainly not subject to the same sort of traffic rights restrictions that are apparent with scheduled carriers. And I think that although there are requirements for permits, there are special events that go on around the world from time to time, such as, let's say, the Cannes Film Festival or the World Economic Forum, where you really have to apply for permits months in advance. Otherwise, with all the tickets in the world, you still can't get anywhere close to it.
Okay. Right, questions from the floor. So what is the procedure? People got to come to the microphones here to put their question to the panel, or have you got a roving mic? Any questions for our panelists here today? All very quiet. Yes. Have you got a roving mic, please? Sorry, sir, could you move across to where the spotlight is? Use that microphone there, and do not touch the microphone. Thank you. Could you tell us your name and who you represent?
Hi, my name is Rolando, and I work for Embraer. I'm the sales director for Middle East. So my question is to George from Wizz Air. Is there anything fundamentally different in regards to operation in the Middle East, particularly to the Abu Dhabi hub, compared to your operation, to your experience in Europe, from passenger behavior to hot and harsh environment, anything that catches your eyes? And another question, can you elaborate a little bit on the competitive landscape that you will see here as your operation increases out of the Abu Dhabi hub? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the questions. Listen, I think I'd probably start off by saying it's early days. You know, we started operations in January, so probably I'll be able to give you a more complete answer 1 or 2 years down the road. You know, I think fundamentally, I mean, this is, you know, I think the response we're getting is very similar to other markets. Clearly, you know, there's some markets which, you know, we can, you know, basically operate without regulatory restrictions, such as markets to Europe. However, as soon as we start looking to other markets, there's regulatory restrictions, which is normal. I mean, we have the same in Europe. But you know, I think fundamentally, you know, consumers are the same. At the end of the day, what they're looking for is low fares, you know, good service, efficient service. So you know, there might be some tweaks to the model here or there, but fundamentally, it's the you know, I think the same secret sauce will work here as it has worked in Europe. With regards to you know, competitive aspect, listen, I think again it's really early days. You know, I think even in the European context, I mean, Wizz has always been really focused on itself. You know, I think we've always said what you know, the biggest risk, we're our own biggest risk. We need to stay focused on ourselves, continue to deliver what we deliver, continue to deliver the lowest cost, continue to deliver you know, good service, good value to customers, and just you know, just really focus on being the best possible airline we can be. And that's worked for us in Europe, and I'm sure that will work for us here as well.
Thank you very much. Next question, please. Yes, if you could take that microphone there. Thanks very much. And your name and who you represent?
Hi, my name is Haitham Sherbini. I'm the Vice President Sales for the Jet Sets. My question again to George regarding Abu Dhabi market. We've been getting a lot of news, specifically this week, that starting 1st of July, all the international markets will be coming to Abu Dhabi. We would like to know, is that happening? Is that part of the expo? What's the plan specifically on that? Thank you.
Unfortunately, thank you for the question, but unfortunately I don't have more insight than what you have. I mean, we've also been reading. We're also you know, really looking forward to it. I think that would allow us to you know, really accelerate our growth. But yeah, we'll just need to you know, wait and see if it's confirmed, and if it is, you know, I think that'll be great news. Thank you.
Yeah, I can add to that. It was announced yesterday by the Abu Dhabi government that from July the 1st, international travellers into the Emirate of Abu Dhabi will no longer need to quarantine. So positive news there. Further questions, please. This gentleman over there. Thank you.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. My name is Gabor, and I'm representing one of the airline operating most of the A380s and present in Dubai. My question is to all of you. I would like to understand, how did you leverage the crisis? What are perhaps the greatest or the single greatest lesson that you can actually use, or you can actually adopt to and alter your strategy going forward? And one more question specific to George. You mentioned the importance of actually even purchasing aircraft under the current circumstances. If you can just elaborate on that, please. Thank you.
Sure, maybe then I can start. I mean, I think fundamentally, we had the balance sheet going into this crisis, which has enabled us to keep investing. One is continuing to take aircraft order. I think that's absolutely critical because as soon as we get out of this pandemic, or as soon as the demand picks up, we will have built an even bigger gap versus the rest of the market because we've taken on the latest technology aircraft. We'll have renewed our fleet. We'll have a more efficient fleet. We'll have a more sustainable proposition. CO2 emissions will be significantly down. So this is why I think continuing to renew our fleet, continuing to take aircraft orders has been absolutely critical. I think the second element, which we really focused on in the last 12 to 18 months, has been expanding our geographic footprint. Abu Dhabi, I mean, that's been in the works for quite some time now. But, places like Russia, where we opened a base in St. Petersburg, or Italy, or Norway, or Albania, just continuing to expand the footprint. Generally what happens in the crisis is, airlines contract, businesses contract. So there's significant opportunities out there in the market as long as you have the fundamentals and you have the balance sheet which allows you to do that. I think the third area we continue to invest in is leadership. At the end of the day, businesses come down to people, and we have significantly enhanced our leadership capabilities with some really important hires in the last 12 months.
Hussein?
Thank you for the question, really. It's an excellent question because I think we all took the growth that has been going on for the past 10 years for granted, and we thought that this is going to continue on and on. I don't see any, whether it's the airline or aircraft manufacturer or any other support industry, had ever thought that this drop is going to be so severe. If we look at the post 9/11, post financial crisis, the dip was 3, 4, maybe 5%, and then within a few months it picked up. But what happened with the COVID was never seen before. What we did at Embraer, we were very lucky. We were one of the few OEMs that did not suffer any cancellation. On the contrary, basically airlines said, no, we want these airplanes, but we kind of maybe need to push them a few months down the road rather than take delivery right now. We basically reduced the staff that work on building airplanes because the new orders were slowed down a bit. But at the end of the day, we're coming back now slowly to really start building the airplanes at the same pace that before COVID. It's something that we need to keep in the back of our mind, that nothing can be taken for granted. We always need to be able to be agile and adapt to the changes that the market impose on us. So it's tough times, but it's a time that we need to re-strategize and rethink of what we need to do if something like this happens again.
John?
Well, I think that what is clear is that these sorts of crises create gaps in the marketplace, gaps that either were very small and existed prior, or which are now emphasized, or create new opportunities, new gaps in the marketplace. And I think then it comes into the whole gambit of seizing the opportunity, making sure you've got a clear plan, making sure that you stick to your timescales, and who knows, a niche today may be mainstream in 2 or 3, 4 years' time. I think 25 years ago, people would not have imagined the size of, for example, the low-cost carrier market as it is today. 30 years ago, no one would have believed that a company like NetJets would own 750 aircraft. So a niche market today created through an opportunity caused by a crisis of some sort, if you seize the advantage. So you've got to sort of think of it in terms of what are the qualities that you need to retain. You've got to retain flexibility, agility. You've got to understand who are your key resources so you don't let them go, which is always a difficult position. Understand where you can possibly save costs, understand where you can make some money, to keep the business going and look at the opportunities to see, as so many airlines have done by seizing on the cargo opportunity. You'll see how many of them have been quite agile to try and fill the empty seats, the passenger seats with cargo, at least to get some revenue through. Yeah.
Thanks, John. Well, that hour's gone very, very fast indeed, and I think I'll just finish off with one question to each of the panelists. This has been a great event, of course, the Arabian travel market, being able to meet people face to face. The next one, big event when it comes to aviation, is going to be the Dubai Air Show in November. So I'm going to ask each of you, if you're going to be there, what your presence will be in terms of the people, the companies you represent. If not, what do you expect to get from the Dubai Air Show? George, starting with you.
I'm sure we'll be there. You know, I think it's a very important event. It's the event where we made, you know, the largest narrow body aircraft order with our you know, sister airlines, the other Indigo airline group. You know, my expectations is, you know, I think everybody's going to be confirming you know, the pickup of the demand, and yeah, we'll be very happy to be there.
Guidelines, face masks are required to be worn at all times.
Being told.
Unless you are exempt. We also ask that you maintain distance from others, observing the one-way system, and regularly wash your hands. Thank you.
Thank you. And Hussein?
Actually,
all right.
الالتزام بارتداء الكمامة، غسل اليدين، والحفاظ على مسافة آمنة طوال الوقت. شكرا.
Just been told it's going to be Russian next.
yes.
We
at Embraer are looking forward for the Dubai Air Show. I mean, this is such a kind of a shot of confidence in the industry, and we're going to be having a big booth, big presence of the team as well. We're bringing the 195, which is the largest regional jet we have, to showcase during the show, and we believe we'll be making some announcements of new orders for that aircraft. It's really a great event, and we're all looking forward to seeing that we're coming back to the normal way how we conduct business.
Thank you, Hussein. And John, early days for you. Perhaps you'll be looking towards MEBA next year.
More like it, yes.
Okay.
I'm not sure that we would have a large or significant presence.
Yeah.
I think we'll attend, there's no question about it. There'll be people there that we want to talk with, and people I hope will want to talk with us.
Gentlemen, thanks very much indeed for joining us and your insights. Let's have a round of applause for our panelists today, George, Hussein and John. Thank you very much indeed.